Well, I hope you know that the emotional connection and the love and the affection that you weren't getting at home, I hope you felt that it was coming from your fans because everybody adored you.
I did. I did. I felt it.
Well, I hope you know there's a lot of love around you. You know, there's only one more thing I want to say to you, Stephanie. But first, I want to read you a poem that you wrote for Bill Holden when you fell in love with him in Hong Kong.
Ooh, where did you get that?
A whisper speaks as clouds descend on Asian peaks. You're everywhere, making round my square. You've softened the edge that once was there. Stephanie, I just want you to know that the way you describe the impact of love in that poem is very moving. And it says a lot about what it means to you to be in a profoundly loving relationship. And I want to thank you for sharing that love with all of us.
Well, thank you. Oof, you got me with that one. I hadn't thought about that in a long time.
Well, there's been a lot written about the notorious casting couch in Hollywood, and you certainly had your share of unwanted advances by Hollywood men. Were you happy to see the Me Too movement finally emerge?
The independents came along and it was fabulous. The casting couch. I'll admit I've been on the casting couch. But it was because I wanted to. If I didn't want to be on that couch, I wouldn't be on there. You could bet on that.
I want to ask you, John, about your approach as a bass guitarist. In your book, you wrote, along with the drummer, it's my role to lay the solid foundation on which the guitars and vocals sit. Good playing is essentially about playing the notes as they feel right in the moment and for the song. I keep it really simple. Where did that philosophy come from?
Well, I couldn't say it better myself.
And you did. Well, a lot of people may not realize, Anthony, that in addition to being a hugely popular singer, you're a very gifted actor. You appeared in The Jeffersons in 1980. And then in 2006, you co-starred in a wonderful movie called Spiral. You played Mr. B.J. Harley. Do you enjoy acting?
I love it. It's part of who I am. See, most people don't know that, Harvey. You did your homework.
My television series and my live show is I'm very, very thankful. I'm very blessed. I never take it for granted. I have had opportunities to do things that most people in my craft have never had and would love to have. And I work harder than anybody to remain number one. And until I decide not to do it anymore, I will always work harder than anybody else to remain the most relevant.
Herman's Hermits had such a long string of hit records, and they were feel-good songs, Peter. They weren't the Eve of Destruction type songs. Was that a deliberate decision to record upbeat songs?
Yeah, because we were those people. You know, you can only record songs that you think fit. So all those songs fitted the general atmosphere within the organization.
Harvey, I was told how wonderful you were, and it was a dream come true. You are everything that people say, and all the way they rave about you is absolutely true. Thank you for having me.
Alan, I've been a fan from the very beginning, and I've seen you perform in concert many times. And what really distinguishes the Manhattan Transfer for me is that you can't be categorized. You're not a jazz group. You're not a pop group. You're not a swing group or an a cappella group. You're a vocal group with eclectic musical styles. Whose decision was that to not allow yourselves to be locked into one genre?
It was our decision in the beginning. You know, we were all eclectic in a way. We had a lot of different musical influences.
You know, the film that Laura and I did, Ramblin' Rose.
Yes.
Do you know that Princess Diana chose that as her favorite movie?
And didn't she host the premiere and a party afterwards for the two of you?
She flew us to London, and she had a royal premiere and a party in our honor. And she sat between me and Laura, holding both our hands while crying, again, watching it a second time. I was pouring sweat. I thought She's holding my hand. She's crying in my performance. I was so nervous. And she was the most wonderful, down-to-earth human being, one that I've ever had the privilege of meeting. She was so real, so there. She was a great human being.
We've got to look for the adventure. We've got to appreciate our failures, not as an end, but as part of the journey, and enjoy each other.
How would you like to be remembered?
Remembered
Yeah,
by who?
the public, the world.
I don't know. I don't have that sort of pretensions. I try a truth teller. You know, I just hope that I'm telling the truth.
Well, I want to tell you, I really loved your book because it's such an insightful expose, not only of your career, but of the music business. Your relationship with the notorious and infamous Morris Levy, owner of Roulette Records, was really fascinating and complex because you felt enormous loyalty and admiration for him, even though you knew he was incredibly corrupt and a bully, heavily involved with the mob, and he was ultimately convicted of extortion.
The first bunch of record company people were really, you know, right off the streets, and a lot of them were involved with the mob. So all I can say is that it's quite remarkable what these guys built. They built this amazing machine called the record business. And, you know, Morris Levy was one of the main builders of the industry. So from a historical standpoint, Morris was really an amazing character. Doing business with him was a whole other story. You know, so we were walking on eggshells a lot, because while we were hanky-pankying and money-moneying and all the others, there was this very dark and sinister story that was going on behind us that we really couldn't talk about.
Well, since you mentioned You Light Up My Life, you became an overnight sensation in 1977 with that song. I mean, suddenly you were everywhere, and we all fell in love with you because you look as beautiful as the song sounded, if that makes any sense. So my obvious question is, did you know when you were recording that song that it would become an instant classic and that you'd still be singing it 45 years later?
I had no idea whatsoever. I was just so excited that I had the opportunity to go to New York and go into a recording studio where I'd never been, record my first solo recording. And I thought the song was nice, but you know, it wasn't the kind of song that you hear and go, wow, what a hit record. I don't think anybody except the guy who wrote it felt like it had legs like that.
Well, Bill, I want to read you something that you wrote in the book that really touched me. You said, and I'm quoting you here, "I have no regrets about going into show business as a child. However, I have come to understand the difficulties that accompany that as one matures into adulthood and beyond. I've often strangely felt in competition with my younger self. And I've also recognized that over the many years, some people just can't help but be disappointed that I'm not a child anymore. I can't do anything about that, but it can be a bit unsettling." Well, Bill, I want you to know that your fans are really proud of the man and the artist and the human being that you grew up to be. I hope you know that.
I appreciate you saying that, and I it resonates with me. And yeah, I guess I know that. I mean, yeah. Thank you.
And thank you for being such a brilliantly researched interviewer. I mean, you really knew more about me than I do, which is a bit worrying.
You are clearly a man of faith. You have a very strong connection to the Lord. And many times in your life, if I understand correctly, you have been saved. You narrowly escaped being murdered by Charles Manson on the night that he killed Sharon Tate in 2008.
Absolutely.
Right? And then in 2008, when you were about to receive the Mary Pickford Award, you suffered respiratory failure and you were about to die. But you heard a voice telling you to go back. It's not your turn.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what do you make of that?
You connect the dots after a while. And if you see, you know what my great-grandmother used to tell me? There's a phrase coming out of people: a hard head makes a soft behind.
David, you come from one of America's most prominent acting families. Your grandfather was Cliff Arquette, and there's your wonderful siblings, Rosanna, Patricia, Richmond, and our beloved Alexis, whom we lost in 2016. How in the world did so much talent come out of one family?
Oh, that's sweet. We're actually fourth generation. So our family goes back to vaudeville. My grandmother and great grandmother and great grandfather performed in vaudeville. So I guess they say we're Nepo babies now, whatever that means. But I feel honored to be able to entertain people for a living.
You know, I mentioned your book in my introduction. I was very touched by the way you wrote about your marriages, your relationships. You have an astonishing ability to see the good in everyone and to forgive. You remained friends with John Derek. You became good friends with Ursula Andress and Bo Derek. Where does that kindness and that compassion and that maturity come from?
I don't know. I don't call it that. I think when you go through the list of things, just Ursula and Bo, I really liked them.
And I have to say, you've done a very thorough job of going back, and trying to figure out, all the stuff that I've done, and to read that book and do all that. I'm very appreciative of that, of doing that kind of research.
My pleasure. And may I say, your friend and mine, Luke Yankee, described what this was like and described who you were. And he was absolutely spot on. You are the most well-read and familiar with a body of work that I have ever dealt with.
Paul Schrader, whom you featured in your book, used to say that it didn't matter what else he did. The first line of his obituary is always going to be that he wrote Taxi Driver. Now, of course, the same thing is going to be said about you, that you'll always first be remembered for directing Grease. Does it bother you at all?
Well, no, because how many directors have a chance to have a movie that goes for 45 years and people are still talking about it and going to it, and all, children, grandmas, teenagers, it's like a one-of-a-kind thing. So I'm very happy to be associated with that.
Okay, Tony, I want you to just sit back for a moment. Just listen to some of these highlights of your career. Just listen to this. One of your very first fan letters was from Elvis Presley. Before you were 20 years old, you were performing on tour with Gene Pitney, Jackie Wilson, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, Jerry Lee Lewis and Dusty Springfield. You attended a party hosted by Sal Mineo with Annette Funicello, Frankie Avalon, Paul Anka, and Fabian. Burt Bacharach produced one of your early songs called To Wait for Love. You played the last show at the Copacabana in New York. On September the 5th, 1976, you stood backstage at the Jerry Lewis Telethon in Las Vegas when Frank Sinatra reunited Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin on live television after they had been estranged for over 20 years, and you were there. You got to spar with Muhammad Ali on national television on the Dinah Shore Show. You got to present Barbra Streisand with a Grammy Award in the movie A Star is Born. You got to do comedy sketches on your TV show with legends like Jackie Gleason, George Carlin, and Jerry Lewis. When you had the flu, Kate Smith nursed you back to health. Danny Thomas did a stand-up routine at your wedding. And Tony, I'm just scratching the surface. Do you have to pinch yourself sometimes to believe the life you've lived?
Thank you for that. I don't know what to say. By the way, you moved me to tears. I don't know quite why, because it's been a long haul.
Because I see your heart.
It's been an unbelievable journey, but all those things that you say I've accomplished or was part of is, you just hit me like I just don't know what to say. There's something, it takes a human being like you, seriously, Harvey, to see through the curtain and look behind the curtain the way you just did, and look at my life the way you have, and to share that with me and move me to my very soul, because all I've ever wanted to do is do a good job, and entertain people and make people happy. Well, guess what, Harvey? You did that for me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.